seeing cases of kids emulating these games because the games are so realistic. They want the sensation of the real experience in real life.
Violence in video games is bigger now than ever. No matter what the rating, kids always seem to get their hands on these games. But in the mid-80s and 90s, kids got their kicks from comics, portraying naughty kids at school. I present to you the Beano comics. These comics were amazing, and it's safe to say that every kid in the UK has read these. Even if you didn't get them like I did on a weekly basis, you most likely got the yearly annuals. Now, as a kid, I was never into superhero comics. The closest I ever come to that was the Turtles, but even still, the Beano was my first geeky obsession. I was so into these comics that for me, it was easy to see what artists did what strips. Introducing Leo Buxendale. This guy worked on strips such as Little Plum, Minnie the Minx, the Three Bears, and the incredible Bash Street Kids. Like most cartoonists, his art was not exclusive to just one company, and he did several other comics such as The Dandy, Wham and Fleetway, where he created the brilliant Help, It's Sweeney Toddler. Obviously a play on words from the infamous Sweeney Todd, this Sweeney was the 2-year-old toddler from hell. Every week you can find Sweeney causing mischief, which normally ended with getting caught by his dad and getting smacked with his slipper. While Sweeney was going from strength to strength by the Lancashire cartoonists, in Sheffield a small computer shop called Just Micro had recently jumped ship from being just a small computer shop and started working on their own computer software, creating games such as Wanted Monty Mole, Thing on a Spring and its sequel Thing Bounces Back, under the title Gremlin Graphics Software Limited. Obviously a fan of the characters designed by Buxendale, the Gremlin boys decided to design a bad boy character loosely based on Sweeney Toddler, called not Jack the Ripper, but instead Jack the Nipper. So here we have the first game in the Jack the Nipper series, and obviously you control little baby Jack. The idea of the game is to build up as much of your naughty meter as possible before losing your lives. This is your nappy rash meter, aka your life bar, and you can build up your naughty meter by performing pranks. Without a guide, this will take you ages to work out, so here are just some of the examples on how you raise that naughty meter. Grab the glue and stick the teeth together. Grab the weed killer to kill Dad's flowers, as well as the fertiliser to grow weeds in his garden. Shoot the plates with your pea shooter, and you can even go into the Just Micro shop and blow up the circuitry with a battery. At least that's what I think you're doing. A nice little Easter egg that you may not have noticed hidden in the game. While doing these pranks, you must dodge everything in sight because even a single touch with another character will raise your nappy rash and eventually lose you a life. This is a brilliant little game. It was so good that Your Sinclair magazine even started publishing a monthly comic strip based on the character. Here you can see the little Nipper not happy about his parents having a lame party in his living room. So, he decides to get pissed. Moving on. Next up is Jack the Nipper 2 in Coconut Capers. As the first game had you platforming and puzzling through 50 screens, the sequel had no choice but to up its game to a whopping 190. Due to all the mischief that Jack caused in the first game, he and his family have been deported to Australia. Unhappy with this, he decides to jump out of the aeroplane using his nappy as a parachute and lands in the middle of an African jungle. Here, Jack must cause as much trouble as possible while avoiding getting told off. The idea and goal in this game is the same, but the style of gameplay is different. As you can see, we have moved away from the comic strip feel of the first game and moved to a more generic 2D platformer. The naughty meter has returned, and now instead of a pea shooter, you can chuck coconuts at your enemies. Again, another great game. Grab the grease and make Tarzan fall off his rope. Trap the tribespeople with a rope. Make them chase you and fall into a lake. scare the elephant with a mouse, and so on until you eventually realise that due to your naughtiness, all the tribespeople now worship you. This game is a big leap forward for the studio. It even has a pretty tricky minecart section. Like I said, this is another great game for the time. It's hard to suggest these games though, considering how long you need to spend working everything out. But if you have the time and you fancy something a bit challenging and retro, you can normally pick these up pretty cheap. With reviews being pretty much all positive, including the incredible World of Spectrum review of 5 out of 5 beers, and Young Sinclair voting the game at 40 in its top 100 games of all time, it's hard to believe that this guy only got one sequel.
Once you start playing Sonic the Hedgehog, everything else seems a little bit slow.
It wasn't long after these games that Gremlin worked out that kids had sort of grown out of the naughty Dennis the Menace days of the past, and instead, being rad, having attitude, and speed was shaking the playgrounds.
Don't worry, I'll catch you.
And all attention was on the new kid on the block. Gremlin decided to go head to head with Sonic and started working on the rival, Zool, Ninja of the Nth Dimension. Or Poots, as he was known during production. But who was Zool? Zool was in fact a gremlin. Good work there, guys. Cooler than Mario, smarter than Sonic. Maybe if they kept him going and putting him on the right systems, they would have got their rival. Either way, the game was so well received that Zool became the Amiga's best-selling game, nearly beating sales of Sonic 2. This caught the attention of Commodore, who after seeing the success of the original Sonic being bundled with the Mega Drive, wanted the character for themselves, and a follow-up game to be bundled with the upcoming Amiga CD32. But like all good game companies, they did not rush it, and the game was unfortunately only 40% complete just months before the release of the console. And instead, the console ended up being bundled with Flare Software's Oscar and Millennium's Digger. Eventually, the game was released exclusively for the Amiga and eventually ported to the Atari Jaguar and PC. In this game, Zool returns with his new female companion, Zoos, and the faithful dog Zoon. It's up to you to save the day, as this time, his enemy Kroll and his assistant Mental Block wish to stifle the world's imagination, causing rampant boredom. Spoiler alert, the ending contained a hint of a possible further sequel, but unfortunately due to poor sales of the system, and no real platformer ever really hitting gold on the PC, I'm not including Jazz Jackrabbit, we never saw another Zool. It wasn't long after, in December 1996, that Gremlin acquired a small company known as DMA Design. Gremlin was then bought out by Infogames in June 1999, with plans to sell DMA and eventually close the doors completely on Gremlin. So there you have it. A brief history on Jack the Nipper, Zool and the original Bad Boys Gremlin. If you want to follow the founder of Gremlin, Ian Stewart, with what else he's done, I suggest Alien Hominide on the console of choice, created by Zoo Digital, who actually created a small intro in an attempt to revive Zool one last time. But luckily, the game ended up being changed to what was eventually Screw Attack nominee for Worst Multi-Platform Game of the Year in 2007, Ninja Bread Man. Despite awful reviews, a sequel was announced, but due to the company going under in 2009, the project was eventually cancelled. Now, for all you naughty bad boy rebel kids out there looking for something to play when you should be in bed, I suggest following what DMA eventually become.